My father stood up in the middle of Sunday dinner, pointed directly at me, and said something that made 18 relatives turn and stare. She abandoned her daughter. The room went silent. My mother nodded sadly. My sister looked away. And just like that, everyone believed them. For 3 years, my parents had told relatives I walked away from my child and chose my career over my family. I never defended myself. Not once. Because I knew the truth didn't need shouting. It needed proof. And hidden inside my purse that night was a folder containing every text message, bank transfer, and court document they hoped nobody would ever see. For 3 years, I was the villain in my family's story. According to my parents, I had abandoned my daughter. I had walked away, chosen my career over motherhood, and left everyone else to clean up the mess. At least that's what they told people. The truth was far more complicated. My daughter Lily was the most important person in my life. Everything I did was for her. Every late night. Every extra shift. Every difficult decision. But explaining that never seemed to matter. Over time, relatives stopped calling. Birthday invitations became less frequent. Family gatherings grew uncomfortable. Whenever I entered a room, conversations seemed to change. People smiled politely. But I could feel the judgment. The worst part was knowing exactly where it came from. My parents. For reasons I didn't fully understand, they had spent years building a version of me that simply wasn't real. And because I refused to argue publicly, that version became the truth in everyone's mind. Then one Thursday afternoon, my grandmother called. She was hosting Sunday dinner. The entire family would be there. "I'd really like you to come," she said gently. For her, I agreed. By Sunday evening, 18 relatives sat around her dining room table. The atmosphere felt normal at first. Food. Conversation. Small talk. Then my father suddenly stood up. He slammed his hand against the table so hard that glasses rattled. The room instantly fell silent. He pointed directly at me. His face was red with anger. "After everything we've done for her," he said loudly, "she abandoned her daughter and this family." Every eye turned toward me. And in that moment I realized this wasn't an argument. It was an ambush. And my parents intended to destroy my reputation once and for all. As my father continued speaking, I barely heard the words. Because suddenly I was thinking about how all of this had started. 3 years earlier, Lily was 11. I was raising her on my own and doing my best to balance work, school activities, and everything else that comes with being a parent. My parents offered help. First, I was grateful. Lily loved spending time with her grandparents. But slowly things began to change. They stopped asking before making decisions. They enrolled her in activities without telling me. Changed schedules. Made promises on my behalf. Whenever I disagreed, they accused me of being ungrateful. The tension kept growing. Then I was offered a major promotion in another city. It was the kind of opportunity that could provide long-term stability for Lily and me. Before accepting, I spent months planning. I arranged housing. Adjusted work schedules. Organized transportation. And most importantly, I made sure Lily remained the center of every decision. But my parents hated the idea. They insisted I was making a mistake. When I moved, they immediately began telling relatives that I had chosen work over my daughter. What they never mentioned was that I visited constantly, called every day, attended school events, paid every expense, and stayed involved in every major decision. The truth didn't fit the story they wanted people to believe. So they left it out. For 3 years, they repeated the same lie until everyone accepted it as fact. Back at the dinner table, my father was still talking. Still painting me as the villain. But this time was different. Because sitting beside my chair was a leather folder. And inside that folder was 3 years of evidence proving exactly what had happened. My father finished speaking and looked around the table as if he expected applause. Instead, he received sympathetic nods. A few relatives shook their heads in disappointment. One aunt looked directly at me. "I can't imagine leaving your child behind." The words stung. Not because they were true. Because they weren't. For 3 years, people had been judging me based on a story they never bothered to verify. I slowly stood up. The room became quiet. My father crossed his arms confidently. He thought he had already won. Without saying a word, I reached down and picked up the leather folder beside my chair. Then I opened it. "What are you doing?" my mother asked nervously. I ignored her. The first document was a stack of travel records. Plane tickets. Hotel receipts. Mileage logs. Every trip I had taken to visit Lily over the past 3 years. I placed them on the table. Next came school records. Tuition payments. Activity fees. Field trip expenses. Every one paid by me. The room grew noticeably quieter. Then I pulled out printed messages. Hundreds of them. Texts arranging visits. Conversations with teachers. Medical appointments. Birthday plans. Video call schedules. Page after page showed the same thing. A mother actively involved in her daughter's life. A mother who never disappeared. A mother who never stopped showing up. The expressions around the table began to change. Confusion replaced certainty. Questions replaced judgment. My father's confidence started fading. My mother wouldn't even look at the documents. Then I placed one final stack of papers in the center of the table. Bank records. 3 years of transfers directly supporting Lily's care. Nobody spoke. Finally, my grandmother slowly removed her glasses and looked directly at my father. Then she asked a question that hit harder than any accusation. If Emily abandoned her daughter, she said calmly, why does every piece of evidence prove the exact opposite? The silence that followed my grandmother's question felt endless. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time that evening, my father seemed completely unprepared. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. My grandmother calmly folded her hands. I asked a simple question, she said. Why does every document prove Emily remained involved in Lily's life? My mother finally spoke. It's not that simple. But her voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. I reached into the folder one more time. There's more, I said. I placed several printed text messages on the table. Messages between my parents and me. Messages I had saved for years. The room leaned closer. One message showed me requesting a visit with Lily. My parents had replied that she was too busy. Another showed me asking for details about a school event. No response. A third revealed that I learned about a medical appointment after it had already happened. Again and again the pattern was obvious. I was trying to stay involved. Someone else was making it difficult. My aunt slowly shook her head. Why would you hide these things from her? Nobody answered. My father stared at the table. My mother suddenly became very interested in her coffee cup. Then my grandmother surprised everyone. I knew some of this already, she said quietly. The room turned toward her. She explained that over the years she had noticed inconsistencies in my parents' stories. Details that never added up. Questions they avoided. Now the missing pieces finally made sense. One by one, relatives began realizing they had been misled. The judgment that had once been directed at me was disappearing. And then the front door opened. Everyone looked up. Standing in the doorway was Lily. And the moment she walked into that room, everything changed. The moment Lily stepped into the dining room, every conversation stopped. She looked around the table, confused by the tension. Then her eyes landed on me. Without hesitation she walked over and hugged me. Tightly. That simple gesture said more than anything else could have. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother looked away. Lily pulled back and smiled. Mom, Grandma said you were here. I smiled back. She did. Then my grandmother asked gently, Lily, can I ask you something? Lily nodded. Do you feel like your mother abandoned you? The room became completely silent. Lily looked genuinely surprised. What? No. Several relatives exchanged glances. Lily continued. My mom calls me every day. She started counting on her fingers. She comes to my school events. He helps with homework. He takes me on trips. She never misses my birthday. Then she laughed softly. Sometimes she knows what's happening in my life before anyone else does. The silence grew heavier. Because the one person at that table who mattered most had just told the truth. Not from documents. Not from receipts. From experience. A few relatives quietly apologized. Others simply looked embarrassed. My parents said very little. There was nothing left to say. The evidence had spoken. And now Lily had too. As dinner ended, my grandmother squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Driving home later that night, I realized something important. Truth doesn't always win quickly. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes patience. And sometimes it takes a folder full of receipts. But eventually the truth catches up. And when it does, it doesn't need defending. It speaks for itself. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable family drama stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my position?